I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Bogus,
Present.
Page,
Here.
Valley,
Here.
Painter, Wolfersberger,
Here.
Cummings,
Here.
Brett.
Here.
All right, I'll try and speak loud enough so everybody can hear me, even in the back. I want to start out by thanking everybody who's here in attendance. I'm going to kind of go over a few rules for the public hearing before we officially go into the public hearing. Should I announce the public hearing first, or can we do that right now?
You just did.
Oh, all right, we're officially on a public hearing, so anyway, the first thing I want to review over the public participation. Anybody who's wanting to speak, we need you to sign in with your name and address. So we have the sign up sheet here if you didn't get a chance to sign it at the back door. If you intend to speak, I want you to come up during the public comment portion of the meeting. Individuals can address the board on listed and unlisted agenda items. Well, it's a little bit different tonight because it's a public hearing, so we really don't have a listed agenda items beside the public hearing. Rules include stating your name and address, limiting your comments to 5 minutes. Please avoid any profanity or abuse. I, as the mayor, also will kind of make sure that we don't have a lot of repetitive and most importantly, no out of order comments. If you're with an organized group of some group, have one spokesman so that we're just not going over the same things over and over. The next thing that I would like to say is if you are speaking, we would like for you to come to the podium and speak from the podium. My village board at this point will not be engaging in any of the conversations as you're speaking. They will respond at the end of hearing the public comments, so they'll be taking notes. Some questions that we feel are necessary to answer throughout the public comment, we'll stop the clock so that Nick or Mark can answer those questions at the time, so that some of the same people might have those very same questions. So that way we'll have that to keep the hearing to move along a little quicker. The next thing is, if we have someone up here speaking at the podium, there'll be no extra speaking in the background. If you have something to say and want to say it, you must be to the podium. I don't want people just having outbursts and things back in the back of the room or whatever. We're going to try and keep everything civil and run things as smoothly as possible. I will give you one warning. If I have to give you a second warning, I will ask you to leave. So I just want to make sure that everybody's clear on that. The next thing is, I really am not sure, and I'm hoping everybody's here that, you know, you want to find out about TIF, you want to know what the village is doing. There seems to be, you know, some animosity running around out in our community. I think that's sad. So I'm just asking you to please be polite tonight and be respectful. This public hearing is to educate and answer questions and express your concerns. We should all appreciate those who give of their time and talents to serve their communities in all capacities and level. I want to thank my trustees who've been up here. They've been doing a lot of research and educating themselves on TIF. When it's time to vote, I trust that their decision will be based on facts and what they believe will be the best outcome for the village's future. They've devoted almost 2 years understanding the benefits of TIF, some of us even longer. Also, I want to thank the school superintendents, the village administrators, Nick, and the other taxing bodies that have all been working through this process for the last couple of years. Their commitment and leadership to our community should all be trusted and respected. So respect goes both ways. amongst everybody. And like I said, the time that's been put into studying this issue and trying to get the word out to the public and stuff is we've tried to do our very best to do that. So I want this to be a good meeting. I hope that you all get the information that you came for, and we'll do our best to answer those questions and be able to move forward. So anyway, I will, before we get started, I will have Nick come up. He's our TIF consultant. He's going to give you just a brief, in case some of you who have no clue what TIF is, Nick is going to tell you what that's all about.
Thank you. So we had a public meeting probably a couple of months ago, and we went over a brief kind of TIF 101 type thing. I'll do that again tonight very quickly, and then, but the real purpose for tonight's hearing is to go through the contents of the proposed plan and the qualifications of the area. So just in terms of how TIF works, so TIF districts, it's just a tool that's available to the village to be able to encourage economic development. And so a TIF district is based on a geographic location that has to be contiguous. We can't have like different parts of town in a TIF. Everything has to be connected. Once the village determines that the area qualifies as blighted, as that term is defined by the law, and we're going to go into that, and they go through the statutory process, they adopt the TIF district, and right now we're in the process of that. The TIF district is in place for 23 years. Essentially how it works is we take all of the assessed valuation within the TIF boundary, and it's essentially frozen. So the taxing bodies will continue to get the same revenue from that base value as they've always gotten. It won't take any money away. But what happens is as property values grow over time, if there's development or just by natural growth, then the tax revenue attributable to that increase in value, instead of going to the taxing bodies, is going to go into the village's TIF account, and then that money can be used to either do public projects to try and beef up the infrastructure to encourage development, or it can be reimbursed directly to private developers for TIF eligible project costs. Okay. The three questions, but the two that are right off the top of my head that I always get initially. One, this is not a separate tax rate. Okay, this by itself will not cause your taxes to go up. Now, I will tell you all, you're gonna get your tax bill in a couple of years. There is going to be a TIF line item on it. There's probably going to be a dollar amount on that. Okay, all that means is that the value of your property increased. It does not mean that you're paying more in tax. Okay, if we take your property out of the TIF the very next day, the tax amount is going to stay the same. Okay, so it's just merely a reallocation of the dollars that you spend instead of going to taxing bodies goes into the TIF account. Okay, the second question I get all the time is the village going to take my property because it's in a TIF district and they want to do development? The answer to that question is no. Right, there are over 200 sources of eminent domain authority in the Illinois statutes. The TIF Act does contain one of them, but if this village is going to use the TIF to do it, it has to be in the plan. It's not in this plan. Okay, so it's not to say that the village can't take your property for some other reason. It just won't be because of the TIF district. Right. And then the other big question I get is, will this change the zoning? And the answer is no, not in and of itself. So if you live in a residential neighborhood, there's not going to be a gas station that comes in next door unless the owner of that property goes through the normal zoning variance process that the village has. So, but it won't have anything to do with the TIF district by itself. Okay, so those are the kind of common questions I usually get. But the TIF stays in place for 23 years. As property values rise, again, that creates increment. That money the village can use to do any public infrastructure project or reimburse a developer for its TIF eligible project costs. Okay. Which projects we can reimburse and how much are kind of determined by the plan that we'll look at in a second. But everything is done by a separate negotiation with each developer in the village, and each developer that gets money, it has to be done by an agreement that's approved by the village board. So it's entirely under the local control. It's not entitlement. So you're not guaranteed to get money. You have to go through the village and SB project that they want to incentivize, and then they do that. So and incentives can take a million different forms. The agreements can look a million different ways. All right. The village can also enter into intergovernmental agreements with impacted taxing bodies. I'm sure that's a topic that will come up tonight, but that's something that the law does allow to. So that's TIF in a nutshell. I will open it up for questions on that part of it. If you have any questions on the mechanics of TIF districts. So any questions on that? Yes.
How soon are the benefits a benefit? How soon does that become a benefit for projects? Is it like a 5-year, 10-year?
So, unfortunately, the property tax system in Illinois is very sluggish, so it takes a couple years before, from the time you do something, before it generates money and you get something. So there can be some initial money just by natural growth factors, but typically a project is done in year 1, assessed in year 2, and then the first money from that project comes in year 3. And so that's generally kind of, there is a little bit of a lag there, but that answers your question. So anything else on TIF basics?
You said it's 23 years, but it can be increased by 15 years also?
All right, so under what the Illinois legislature is currently doing is when you get to near the end of life, that 23 years, if you get all of the taxing bodies support, and that is, it's not in the law, but it is something that the legislature requires before they'll do it, they will issue 12-year extensions beyond that initial 23 years. But again, you have to have every single taxing body sign a letter of support to get that. And then recently they've been offering second 12-year extension. So 24 plus 23 was like 47. So right now there are some TIFs that are going for 47 years. But again, that's something done in Springfield, but you really need the taxing bodies to approve that TIF to get it. Anything else? Okay, so the purpose for tonight's meeting is go through the plan. I have extra copies of this if anyone wants it. I'll pass it around if you want one, take one. Okay, this is kind of what I'm gonna be going through, so.
Anybody want one?
Yes. Okay, so this TIF plan is the governing document. Okay, this says what we can do. This also has the qualifications in it for how this area qualifies for TIF to begin. All right, so first I'll go through the public records. So on page 10 of this, if you have it. So this process actually started statutorily back in 2017, and then it was put on hold, and then the village kind of picked it up again a couple of years ago. So the first thing was to establish the interested parties registry by ordinance on April 25th of 17. So anyone that wants to receive a mail notification of what's happening in the TIF when notices are sent, they can sign up to be on this registry, and then they'll get mailed a notice. The initial public meeting mailing was sent out on May 8th of 2017. We had the initial public meeting on May 23rd of 2017. Then we had, so then that's kind of end of the process 8 years ago. Then January 27th of this year, we had a second public meeting mailing. And then we held the second public meeting here on February 11th. After that, our office filed a draft of this plan with the village on February 14th for public inspection. After that, we set the date for tonight's hearing on February 25th. Copies of that went out to all of the taxing bodies on February 26th. The certified mailings went out to taxpayers and residents on March 7th. And then also everyone that lives within a 750-foot boundary surrounding the TIF area gets mailed a notice. And so that was done on March 14th. Then we mailed to the interested parties registrants that same notice on March 14th. On March 20th, we convened a meeting of the Joint Review Board. So the Joint Review Board is made up of the impacted taxing bodies. Most of the taxing bodies that are on your tax bill. And the purpose for that meeting is we invite them to come in, we review the contents of the plan and applying characteristics, and then the taxing bodies have an advisory vote only, okay? And what they're voting on is not a matter of policy, whether they think it's a good idea or not. They're voting on two things. One, that the area qualifies as blighted, as that term is defined in the TIF Act, which again, we're gonna go through that in a second. And then they're also voting on whether or not the village is following the correct statutory procedure to get the TIF put in place. Okay, so that's what they were voting. There were 6 members that attended that meeting. All 6 voted yes, that the area does qualify as blighted and that the village is following the correct procedure. Okay, so that was done on March 20th. Then there's 2 publications for tonight's hearing. One was on March 27th, the other on April 3rd. Tonight we have the public hearing, and then the only other order of business after this is for the village to actually approve the 3 ordinances to adopt the TIF district, which they're scheduled to do for April 29th. So that's kind of the process to get a TIF district in place. That usually takes at the fastest end 4 or 5 months. Here it's taken 8 years, okay, because there was kind of a stop in the action for various reasons. But now I'll move on to the characteristics and how we qualify this area. Okay, so the area as a whole has to qualify as blighted, and blight is defined by the TIF Act. Okay, so one other question I get a lot is, I'm in the TIF district, you're saying my house is a piece of crap, that's not what we're saying, okay? It could be, but it doesn't have to be, all right? And not every single parcel has to qualify, okay? So there's two different types of properties you can have in a TIF. An improved property, something that has a structure on it, and then a vacant property, right? Something that's just flat, blank, okay? So in total, there are 579 parcels in this area, all right? 508 of those parcels qualify under the different types of qualifications that we can have, okay? And so first I'll go through let me back up. Sorry, that was the improved parcels. The total parcels are 640, 578 of those qualify. So that's almost 90% of the parcels that do qualify, okay? Coming back to the improved, that's where the 579 and 508 comes in. So almost 90% of the parcels exhibit the necessary characteristics for blight. Okay, so even within that subgroup, then there's another subgroup of parcels. If the structures on a parcel are 35 years of age or older, then we only need 3 of the qualifying characteristics. If they're newer than that, then we need 5. Okay, and so the characteristics I'm looking at now on page 12, if you have a plan. So the characteristics are dilapidation, obsolescence, deterioration. The deterioration is the one that's kind of your dictionary definition of blight, what you see in terms of crumbling buildings, cracked infrastructure. Code violations, illegal uses, excess vacancies, lack of sanitary facilities, inadequate utilities, overcrowding, deleterious uses, EPA issues, lack of planning. So the lack of planning characteristic, that's if the improvement that was built was either built without having a comprehensive plan in place, or if there was a plan in place, that plan wasn't followed when the thing was built. Okay. And then the last one is the declining or static EAV factor. Right. So for this one, we look back 5 years, and 3 of the last 5 years, if the assessed value of the properties either went down or remained static, they didn't keep up with the pace of inflation, then we hit that characteristic. So I will tell you all, there was a huge bump in EAV in the last year that happened across the state with the increase in property values. So, so for that 1 year, we didn't get it. But when we look back 5 years, 3 of those 5 years, we do. And again, this is just for the TIF area. So you could have a city that's exploding in growth, but the particular area we're targeting for the TIF maybe didn't have that level of increased property value. Okay, so that one can be a little misleading in a year like this, where we just had that huge increase in value. So of those characteristics, again, most of the properties in this area that are improved were 35 years of age or older. So we only needed 3. We had more than 3. So the 4 that were the most prevalent were the deterioration, inadequate utilities, and that's going to be your sewer issues, your stormwater issues, which you guys know about those. Okay, if there's inadequate water run to the sites, all that kind of stuff factors in that. Then we got the lack of planning and the EAV. So those were prevalent in almost every single one of the parcels that qualified. And then there was a smattering of other ones that you can see if you have this plan. So the improved areas definitely qualify. Now we'll switch to the vacant. And here with the vacant, there's 2 different ways to qualify vacant properties. So again, if you're looking at page 13, you either need 2 of this top group of characteristics or 1 of the group underneath it. And so we have 69 vacant parcels, all 69 qualify. For the ones where we need 2 characteristics, there were actually 3 that were prevalent in most of them. 1 was obsolete platting. That's really like your landlocked parcels or a parcel layout that doesn't quite make sense and isn't conducive to development. Deterioration of so the property is vacant, but right next door is a parcel with a building that the building's deteriorated. That's one. And then the other one is that declining or static EAV factor that was present in all of them as well. So they all qualify under that. But then separately, we have automatic qualifiers. 1 was a railroad right of way or an unused railroad, so that's an automatic qualifier for 1 of them. 17 of them had either flooding themselves or they contribute to flooding in adjacent property. And then 4 of them are vacant now, but they had a structure on them before, and that structure was blighted before it became vacant, and that structure got knocked down. So all the vacant parcels qualify under this. Most of the improved parcels qualify under the improved characteristics. So the blighting characteristics that we need are present, so we have a valid TIF district. Okay, so part of the plan is going through all of those qualifications. The other important part of the plan is go through the projects that we're hoping to attract and what we can do with the money. Okay, and so now I'm going to switch to page. If you have a plan, I'm going to switch to page 16, okay. So we got two different types, general groupings of projects. There's public projects that the village can undertake. This is gonna be your streets, sewers, stormwater, water lines, utilities, anything in the nature of public improvements is gonna be in this section. And so there's different line items for any possible thing the village can do in that realm. There's different line items, but the total cumulative amount is $43,750,000, okay? One thing I will reiterate, and even more comes in with the private projects. This is not a guarantee that the village is gonna spend this money, because there's no guarantee the village is gonna get this amount of money. This is just a wish list, all right? These numbers are gonna be very large, all right? It is very likely that we don't come anywhere close to hitting these numbers, all right? But we can't exceed the total dollar amounts in this plan without having to go through an amendment, which is very similar to what we're doing to establish the TIF district. We have to go through the public meeting, the public hearing, the joint review board meeting. Separate ordinances have to get approved by the village. We have to do all the publications, and it's a very costly, time-consuming process. So if we're gonna get over these numbers, we have to go through all that. So we want to make sure those numbers are pretty high in the beginning, so we don't have to worry about it. So that's the public projects. For the private projects, I'm starting on page 18. We're pretty much including any type of development that can occur in this area that complies with your zone. So it's going to include a smattering of different types and scopes and scales of residential projects, commercial projects. There might be some light industrial, although I don't know that you have industrial areas in this area. But again, there's different dollar amounts associated with each type of project. We can reallocate dollars between the different line items. But again, we can't exceed that total bottom line number of 25,500,000. Okay. Now that total bottom line numbers that can be adjusted for two things in the future. One, we get a 5% adjustment, and then that number also goes up each year for CPI, for inflation. Okay, so what we can spend up to is going to be this plus those two factors. So any questions on that?
Sir?
Yes.
Sorry. So if we have property in the blight area, can we find out how it was determined to be blighted?
Not very easily, but but I would point you to the plan, and like I said, most of the properties in that area are gonna have.
I have one, I was kind of going over in my head,
Yeah,
so.
what you're
that's
probably gonna have, you're definitely gonna have the EAV factor, because all of them have that. Well, no, I mean, they all have that, like I'm telling you.
Well, no, mine's been increasing, it hasn't been stagnant.
It's compared to an inflation factor, so it may be increasing, but not enough. And then the lack of planning characteristic was there. And then probably some sign of deterioration. It may not be your house, it may be street, sidewalk, something that wasn't quite up to a contemporary standard. So that's probably the three that were prevalent if your property qualifies, but not every single one was. So you could be part of the.
I'm definitely over 100, it's over 100 years old.
Yeah, so you probably had something there. So I guess that's all I got. So I'll open it up to general questions, or if you want to come up to the podium and have at it.
Is that wrap up your part?
Yeah, that's my deal.
We will refer to you with various different questions throughout, so I guess we'll start here. Whoever wants to be the first to step up and
Is there anybody that wants to participate in public comment that did not sign this sheet? Anybody going once? Okay, so okay. Lance Landick.
I can sign up for it.
You should sign last if you didn't want to go first.
That's kind of hoping to wrap things.
Good evening. As many of you know, my name is Lance Landick. I'm the superintendent of St. Joseph CCSD 169, the grade school district. I had not originally planned to speak tonight, but after the incoming mayor put out a statement, then the fire protection district put out a statement, I felt I had to say something on behalf of our school district. Not saying anything would have allowed anyone to fill the void created by a lack of a statement with whatever they wanted or whatever they had heard, true or false. Our school board has been discussing the TIF for almost 2 years now. It's been on our agenda every month since September of 2023. I've been meeting regularly with representatives from the village over that same time period to work towards coming to an agreement that would allow the schools to continue to receive some of the tax dollars associated with the tax growth once the TIF is in place. Please understand, though, that as much as these meetings can be described as haggling back and forth, they are not truly negotiations, because as we've been told, the village can just do this, and it doesn't have to have any agreements. That being said, we are grateful they are willing to discuss an agreement. As a superintendent, it is my job to try to get the best agreement possible for the district, just as the village administrator and the TIF consultant are trying to do for the village. What makes this task difficult is that in order to do what is best for the village, tax dollars intended to help educate children must be taken from the schools and other taxing bodies to fund the TIF district. One could argue, as was mentioned earlier tonight, that that's not true, because without the TIF, there would be no new houses or no new businesses sending tax dollars to the schools. So you can't lose what you never had. However, in our most recent tentative agreement, language was introduced that could possibly cause the district to lose funds from property value growth on both existing residential and existing businesses that the school districts are currently receiving tax dollars from. I asked the village board members to please advise their representatives to remove that language from the tentative agreement. I am not going to say TIFs hurt school districts. In some cases, and in some communities, they could help school districts. What I can say is that TIF districts do take money from schools. Because of that, I feel that it is important for the village to continue to work with both school districts to come to an agreement that will continue to provide the financial resources necessary to help maintain our schools' reputations as being some of the best school districts in East Central Illinois. This TIF and any TIF agreement that comes out of this is going to well outlast any current village board member, any current school board member, the village administrator, the TIF consultant, and either of the two school superintendents. That is why it is so important to come to an agreement that will be fair for all parties today, tomorrow, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, and even 23 years from now. None of us want our legacy to be that we simply took action on this and let someone else deal with any negative impact down the road. Thank you.
Susan McKinney,
I didn't mark that I was speaking.
sorry, it says yes next to it, but.
Oh, did I? I'm sorry.
That's okay. Todd did.
Hit 505 Laurel Drive. Nice, no, don't lean on this. It's dangerous. Also your St. Joseph Township Supervisor. I was hoping Susan would also speak, but I'll speak on her behalf. And the township and the village have had a great relationship for years and years, right? We understand that. We also understand, at least I do as your supervisor, that the village needs to grow. At least in some capacity. I think everybody agrees with that. How we grow, what comes to town, that's all up to interpretation from folks. But the bottom line is, I've been very vocal about this. You may have already heard me say it. I absolutely despise the statute that allows a municipality to scrape funds from other taxing bodies in order to grow an area that's serviced by those other taxing bodies. And by limiting the amount of negotiation that can go, say, you know, we're going at 0% or 1%, we'll give you that, but, and even limiting that. So it's, you know, it is truly up to you folks sitting in these seats. What your vote is determines how these other taxing districts are going to provide these services. The library is of my utmost importance. The township is financially stable. We do a great job taking care of our roads and all of that good stuff. The village, the library is not a village library. We've heard people say that before. It is not. It's a township library. They tax. We do their levying for their taxes, but it's a township funded service. Now we know that even in the best years in St. Joe, I'm born and raised here. We built our home in 1994 on Laurel Drive. And we all say, well, even in our best years, we weren't building 10 to 15 homes a year. So if we're talking new residential subdivisions, then we're looking at years down the road before the schools get the increase from the kids that might move there to go to the schools and affect their funding on that side. But what's it gonna do to the library? Again, it's over time. The library has their own specific set of nuances that is limiting the library from staying exactly, it has to stay exactly where it's at. You know, eventually, however many years it's gonna take, if this subdivision does come in. Granted, we're gonna have a bunch of kids and a lot more use on the library. And they're handcuffed because in your negotiation was 1%. Right? If that's what we landed on, was 1%. So they're gonna feel that stress for sure. So as long as everybody understands that, it's not a village thing, it's a township thing, their funding's gonna be cut. At least stagnant with any new growth. We've already decided on the township board side, we're gonna take care of the library. We've always done that. Now we're gonna be forced to do that, and that's fine. We think it's a very beneficial addition, thing we need to have here in the village. So I guess the bottom line is we haven't drawn a line in the sand. We've always worked together, shared public works, things back and forth. This muddies the water a little bit, but it doesn't create an environment that we're not going to be good neighbors. Yes, you are taking some of our tax dollars. And hopefully, and I'm very optimistic for this TIF, that we're gonna get the right amount of growth. We're gonna increase revenues across the board eventually. And that's gonna be done in a well planned out manner. And that is gonna come up to vote, I'm assuming, in 2 weeks. And we'll see how this all works. But the bottom line is, and Joe, we just got our agreement today. So our intergovernmental agreement with the township was sent off to our attorney to review it some more. There's some language in there that, I'll be frank, it's all lawyer stuff. That didn't set well. And I'm hoping, and I'm assuming, that even after the 29th, after the vote, that these intergovernmental agreements can still be tweaked.
Yes.
Thank you. You guys can answer, please.
We-
Because there's a lot of
we
stuff-
refer to our attorney for that, so.
I felt that really quick, right? So, again, we're working with ours. The fire department is a huge concern. I know I'm out of time. The fire department's a huge concern. The library is a huge concern on their funding. So I hope we can reach somewhere in there that we can make this thing work. Thank you.
Brian Brooks.
You sure?
Yeah.
May I go ahead and speak now?
Yeah.
Thank you. Susan McKinney, I'm the librarian. I've been here 34 years. I've watched this town grow. The outgoing mayor actually was a library board president for me at one point in the past. I've gotten to know kids. I've got kids bring kids who were kids when I started working here, now bringing grandkids in the library. I love this little town. There's a lot of confusion sometimes. I've had people say, why don't you move the library? Why don't you rebuild the library? For those of you who haven't read the trust document, Maud Swearingen Davis, when she left the money and left the land, built the library, she initially left the will for the women's club to build the library when she died. Well, 12 years later, she was still alive and it hadn't been built yet. So she took her own money, built the library where it currently stands. And she set up a trust. So when she died, the women's club that was running the library as volunteers could run it and the money would support it with the farmland that was left to the library. Unfortunately, we all know how that can go. When I first started working at the library in 90, the board at that time was in the process of working to sell the farmland because it was costing the library tax money instead of giving us money to run the library. When I was hired in, they were halfway through their working with the judge and the courts. So we have to stay on the land we are on. The trust says that if that land ceased being used for the library, we would lose the trust investment. We have to protect the library. We can't move. The library was built in a way that To build a second story, we'd have to tear the whole thing down. And we're not talking chump change doing something like that. At one point, we actually tried to talk to the railroad about buying the land where the grain elevator sits, to see if we could annex that and just build a library, you know. And we've been unable to do that sort of stuff. So we're stuck in the building we're in. Todd and I were talking about it earlier today. With the way things are now, a lot more people are using e-sources. We still buy new stuff. We just don't keep the old stuff that's not being read anymore. We aggressively weed. So we always have stuff that the people want now. We subscribe to several online resources for our people so that they can do their downloadables without having to pay for it. Those things cost money. One of the biggest concerns I have in the agreement we got today was that 1% that you say you'll give us can only be used for capital and education and training. Our education and training through the system for how we run our library doesn't cost us anything. So capital, that would mean building, but that means we would have to store up several years to even be able to use it for capital. So if you guys are limiting what I can use that 1% on, which books, programs, resources are not in that list. So we need to discuss what I'm gonna be able to use that 1% even on that you're going to possibly give me. I'm hoping the township will continue to take care of us, but that's just a concern I have. And the main reason I keep bringing up these things is, it's not that I'm against the TIF district. I'm one of those people, I want people to look at the good and the bad and make long-term decisions that will be in the long term, the best decision possible. And I feel like if we don't look at both sides, if we don't look at the negative, we don't look at the positive and come with a reasoned decision, we can be as short-sighted as some people are nowadays in other areas, that they make a decision and 10 years later they're going, why did you do that? So I'm not against it. I just want to make sure we have all of the knowledge we can possibly have to make an informed decision. Thank you very much.
Can I address a couple of things? I can answer some of your.
Okay.
So the agreement that's been proposed, and there's features of it similar to the school agreement.
Oh, and sounds
So there are, I forget how many parcels I just started off, but 480 of those parcels are existing residential parcels. And through the draft of the agreement with the school district, those are all going to be declared as 100% surplus, again, with some possible future exceptions. And so how surplus funds work are, the village will get that increment from the county, okay, but then we calculate how much of that increment is generated by those 480 parcels. And then the village will return that back to the county, and then the county will redistribute that pro rata to all of the taxing bodies according to their share of the tax bill. Money coming back in that way can be used for any purpose, not just capital expenditures. Okay, now, the act does not allow us to single out individual taxing bodies, and then have you be able to use the money on whatever you want. It limits, it's not us limiting it, it's the law. So we can only reimburse capital expenditures beyond, you know, whatever we do in addition to the surplus. So that's why the agreement was drafted in that way.
Ryan Brooks.
Brian Brooks, Superintendent of Logan School District, 6 Butler Drive. I want to start first, I guess, by just stating that I and our board appreciate what each of you do by serving our community, whether it's as trustee, mayor, or building administrator. Your work doesn't go unnoticed by us, any of us over at the high school. Your jobs are certainly not easy, and I'm sure you were overly looking forward to tonight, probably. I also want to publicly thank Tammy for many years of service, not only as a mayor, but also on the board of trustees. I believe you've served close to 2 decades maybe in St. Joe, and I think that should be commended. I appreciate and respect the fact that this group has taken an active approach to trying to start some type of commercial residential growth. I think it's needed in St. Joe. Our board concurs with that. My personal opinion, as someone who's lived here for 21 years, is that we're probably falling behind some other communities around Champaign-Urbana who are very similar to St. Joe. We've become somewhat stagnant. Many have asked where the school districts stand on this. Lance kind of elaborated a little bit from their school district, and we both thought it was important that we stated something in that regard. And some of the questions have been just in particular, how do we view the TIF? Are we in favor? Are we not in favor, et cetera? We really haven't stated anything publicly for a couple different reasons. We didn't want to do it through social media. We really didn't want to do it through any media. type because we didn't want any possibility of statements being taken out of context. So we do fully support commercial and residential growth. I think, I don't want to speak for all 7 of our board members, but I think the majority, if not all of them, support that. We're also super appreciative of the opportunity to be at the table, the discussions we've had with Joe and Nick. Even through disagreements, I think they've been respectful and professional on both sides. In full transparency as a school district, we wish the growth could happen in some manner other than a TIF district, for the same reason the others have stated. It does stunt the growth in some areas for us as far as tax dollars. Our primary reason for that is there's so many variables over 23 years that could happen. That none of us, we can all predict, but none of us know exactly what's gonna happen for 23 years. That's our biggest hesitation and our number one hesitation in the whole TIF district is the residential piece of it, because that could have the most impact on our school districts. To be fair on that, some or all of these things could be positive as well. It could go great. If it works out well, it could be a win-win for all parties, the village, school districts, taxpayers, and everybody. And obviously that's the hope if the village board decides to move forward with this. There's been some speculation we've heard about as to why an agreement hasn't been reached with the school districts. I won't speak for the village, but from our end, we are trying to do our due diligence for future students. We'll walk those hallways, and it won't impact, as I think Lance or somebody made the comment, and it's true. I don't know that anybody that's in these positions in this room will see a positive or negative impact during our time in those positions. But we're also doing this in support of our taxpayers. And, we want to try to come up with an agreement that's going to be fair, that minimizes risk to the schools, but also to our taxpayers. We don't want, long after I'm gone, our school district having to go to the taxpayers and ask for a tax increase, because if they were to be short on money due to the TIF district. And so that may not happen. It may work out great. We all hope it doesn't happen, but without some type of fair agreement, we feel there is a greater likelihood that it could happen at some point. One thing that constantly comes back to me during these discussions is the outcome of a strategic planning committee that the village asked myself and multiple other people to serve on back in 2023. This committee was tasked with figuring out, what made St. Joe, what was most important to people who lived here in St. Joe. And taking this information into the village to help them to drive decision-making in the future. After spending 2 separate nights over, I think, together as a group, over 6 hours, I believe, doing multiple group activities, the committee came to one final conclusion, which we probably all could have started the meeting with, is my guess, but most families live here and move here because of the schools, and it's a safe community. And so whether a TIF district is voted in or not, those 2 things, we feel strongly that we need strong schools and we need a safe town for the next 23 years, no matter which direction this goes. And growth and fairness is probably a part of that answer as well. Last thing I'll say is this, and this is more for me as a community member than it is a superintendent representing our school district. I grew up in Peoria, Illinois, loved every minute of it, and have a ton of pride from where I grew up in my hometown. I had never lived in a small town until we moved here. My wife and I have lived here for 21 years. We've raised 3 kids here in an incredible community. And the number one thing that's always stood out to me over the years is the way this community has always come together united during tough times when needed to. I truly hope and trust that the village will do right by all the taxing bodies if the TIF district does come to fruition. But whatever the bill or the board of trustees decides, I would hope that we all come together and support that decision, respect it, and then we all come back together and find a way to make it work, whether it's a TIF district or we go a different direction. I hope we can all do that. I appreciate all you do and appreciate your time. Thank you.
Right.
Very good. Jim is Lori O'Brien.
Thank you. Hello, I am Jim O'Brien and Lori is right here. We come as residents. As of this moment, I'm not a member or representative of any taxing body. We live at 501 East Grand and I've been here for 23 years. Love St. Joe, love everything that it provides and love ways to find to contribute as well. I want to thank you, the board. You said it can be some 2 years or longer. That's a lot of investment of time and resources. But I'm hearing the other speakers, I realize that some of these taxing bodies just have received their final version of it today. And with the new board coming in, I would like them to have an opportunity to evaluate the boundaries and exceptions within the TIF district. If that's an option, not that anything drastic would happen on the 11th hour, but again, I thank you all for doing this. But I don't want to delay it, but if there is a chance to have the new board have their look at it, because they're gonna have the first 4 years of the 23. That would be my request. Thank you.
Jim Page.
Won't lean on it, I promise. For those, my name's Page, for those who have read my open to the community on that I posted, and for those that don't, I strongly support the TIF. And here's why. First of all, a lot of negatives about the TIF on social media and rocks on Queen of Hearts nights and all over town in conversations. There's been a lot of back and forth on this, and I want to, reiterate what Brian said about coming together. Whether this works or not, we still have to come together. And I've already reached out to Brian and Lance to talk about what's next after May 13th, when I'm sitting in Tammy's chair. How are we going to make this happen? If the vote happens on the 29th, let's roll up our sleeves and make this work. And the same thing with Todd and Susan and fire department. I've been in law enforcement my whole life. My career is in law enforcement, so I'm kind of a safety guy. I want to make this work for everybody. The reason I'm really in support of this, I'm concerned about the economic health of St. Joe, of the entire village. Our population is going down, which means less motor fuel tax, state payments from LGDF, from income tax, which results in fewer streets being fixed, fewer sidewalks being fixed, less support for the parks and for recreation. Our school enrollment's declining. I think, Lance, you mentioned in the last hearing that there's been 150 or so fewer kids in the middle and grade school. That's going to eventually grow out to the high school. It's going to experience that, which is less money coming in from the state per student. Outside businesses are leery of coming into a town that's shrinking. I've talked to several, and since I've been in this mayor run, talked to a lot of folks that own businesses. Hey, think about coming to St. Joe. They're a little leery about the population decline. We've had no real growth over 10 years, combined with inflation over 20%, and that means a stagnant tax base and potential deferred capital infrastructure maintenance, which nobody wants, especially in a town that has stormwater runoff problems, and we have to do stormwater drainage projects one after the other because that's a real problem for us. Without some growth of some kind, it means we're either going to have to increase property taxes. Does anybody want that? Or we're going to have to grow, and it's one or the other. Everyone here is painfully aware, as I mentioned already, the village is under no obligation to consult with the local tax bodies. That's what most municipalities do. They don't. Am I correct? Most just say
A larger percentage than I don't do agree.
then don't do agreements at all. To the village's credit, they've at least engaged in discussions. I don't know what those have been. I haven't been privy to any of those, but at least they've done that. There are 1,500 active TIFs in Illinois in 500 municipalities, which is 40% of the cities, villages, and towns in the state. So this isn't a new thing. For 50 years, 48 years, I think it's a well-trod path. The village is a co-equal branch of government with the schools and the township and the fire district, and it has responsibilities given to it by the General Assembly. One of those responsibilities is economic health for the public good. One authority that's been given to villages and cities all over the state is the TIF, to make sure that that happens. At least another tool to
encourage growth as it comes along. And I hear a lot of people say, I don't want to be like Muhammad. Well, I don't either. I don't want uncontrolled growth. I'm looking at modest growth so we can offset property tax increases and not have them, because we need some growth to do that. We've tried for the last 8 years, since 2017, to get developers to come to town, and they won't, because they go to Monticello, Fisher, Villa Grove, and other places with TIFs where they can get financial incentives. The property around St. Joe is expensive because of the law of demand. And in order for developers to make any money and to grow this town, they have to make money, and that's what the TIF does. It provides an incentive for the developers, or we build the infrastructure so they don't have to, so that the property owner and developer can make a deal. So I could talk for a long time, and anybody that wants to talk to be the new mayor after this, I'm an open book, and I'll sit down and talk to anybody. I just want to close by saying, I want to make this work. If this board passes it, if this board doesn't pass it, the next board's going to have to. In my opinion, that's what we're going to have to do. But if this board passes it, I promise that I will work with all the taxing bodies to make sure that the impact is as minimal as it can be, and that we'll work together to make it happen one way or the other to everybody's benefit. My time is way over, and I'm sorry. But that's all that's left to do.
That was all on the list of people who wanted to speak this evening. Is, I guess, if there's no other further questions or any discussions, I'll open it up to my board with any responses, or it didn't seem like there was any open-ended questions.
One gentleman said he wanted to wait for the next board. That's gonna happen. We've been here doing this thing. I'm not gonna step aside at the end and let somebody who knows nothing about what's going on step in and say, I don't know what I'm doing. So, I mean, we're gonna vote on the 29th.
Sure, can I respond to that?
Sure.
Hearing the next mayor supported eases a lot of my concerns.
Okay.
Any other trustees have anything to say?
I would just like to say thank you very much to the superintendents who spoke, to everyone who spoke, really, because it's very valuable to hear everybody's opinion. I very much appreciate hearing respectful tones. It's not necessarily what I know most of us have seen a lot of. I think we all who have been looking at it a lot understand it's not a perfect scenario for anyone. Like Brian said, we'd love to see development without a TIF. Yeah, we would all love to see it not be required. But like Jim just said, you know, we've been trying that method and it hasn't been working. We need to try something. I just really wanted to say I appreciate you guys talking. It's no fun to talk. You gave up the night to do it, and I appreciate the positivity.
Gary, did you have some?
So I just want to say thank you to everyone who's here tonight. We are listening to what you're saying. We have not taken this lightly. We have spent a lot of time, a lot of our own time. I don't need anything for that. I'm just saying we are taking this seriously and we will work with you. I think it's safe to say that, you know, with what Mr. Page has said, I think with the new board, we're trying to bring them up to speed. And I think they will hit the floor running, and we will try to do the best that we can for this community. We all love this community or we wouldn't be here. So thank you.
I moved out here over 20 years ago. Probably Brian and I had the same truck to move in with. But anyway, I don't know, 6, 7 years ago, Brian and Lance's predecessor, I told him, I said, at that time, there was a lot of demands that the reason the TIF wasn't passed is it would have been a tax increase on every person in St. Joe had we gone down. So it was a no-brainer turn down. And I told Brian and Todd, I said, look, I gave my word. We'll take care of you if you need it. But we gotta have some latitude
to go ahead and make the improvements to infrastructure. Nothing's gonna happen unless these improvements, and I told Rusty the same thing, you know, and he expressed different things, and I'll give you that commitment. I hope my word's worth something, but it doesn't mean we've got to have room to grow. If we can't grow, the school's already down, because you remember you said 2023, what did I ask you? What was the capacity of the school? Did you have room for, I was concerned about overcapacity. And anyway, that being said, it didn't happen then. This is an opportunity for the community. That may not be one that's all lollipops and roses, but it's the best way to see some growth and encourage some growth in some manner. Some areas aren't going to get developed because it's just too costly. But that's a decision we'll make on a case-by-case basis. And again, I think it's good to hear everybody's input, and you weigh it good, bad, whatever. But thanks for your input, and feel free to come in and talk some more.
And I was gonna, off of Art's thing, I mean, they had a chance to pass the TIF 8 years ago and chose not to. And the same concerns are going on now where you guys say, maybe we don't need the TIF to grow. Well, in 8 years, we haven't grown. We're going nowhere. I think we gotta take a chance on this because we didn't last time. I think we let the schools try to go after too much money. We turned it down, and we want something that works for everybody. But the TIF, if we give everybody what they want, then we're right back where we started and we don't even have any TIF money. So the whole thing is you just gotta believe in it, and hopefully it's gonna work. And I mean, had we done it 8 years ago, we'd probably be seeing all the benefits of it.
Yeah, but
We're starting to see.
Yeah, but 8 years ago, you had a developer that was trying to force his hand in the pockets.
We don't have anything.
Well, no, I agree, but to say that it was because.
I'm just saying, and that may be true. I wasn't in on that deal. I can only, go by what I heard, how the deal went down. I'm just saying, 8 years later, we're no better off. We've got to do something unless we're just ready to dwindle away, so.
I just have a question. My mom has lived in St. Joe for almost 50 years in the same house.
Congratulations.
Yes, she still lives there. I've lived in Mahomet for the past 35 years. Please don't. Please don't, because I hear no one wants to be Mahomet. I hear that. I see it on social media. Then my question is, why is it that people live here are developing in Mahomet? What do you have in St. Joe that people who live here are going to develop here, and not people who own businesses here, live out of state or live in other communities? Because I think personally, if you live in your community, you invest in your community and you don't invest in other towns. That's just me personally. We have a TIF. We have TIF districts in Mahomet. It took a long time to visually see any improvements. I'm thinking 8 to 10 years before new roads or new anything you could see. Now it's doubled in size. I remember when I graduated from high school, St. Joe and Mahomet had the exact population, Mahomet's almost 10,000 now. Yes, there's 2 different exits. Yes, there's the west side of town. But again, why is it that people that live here are developing in Mahomet? I guess my question is, again, what does St. Joe have to offer for a developer?
That's what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah. I'm just saying, because I'm sitting here and I'm like, okay, this person owns in Mahomet. They also own in St. Joe, but this person is developing in Mahomet. Why is that? It's just.
There's a lot of people who would like to build here, like to stay
Yeah.
here, and it's just not here.
Right.
And when you go ahead,
Yeah.
I mean, when you look at saying an incentive for a developer, it doesn't mean you're gonna give them cash. It might
Sure.
be some, okay,
Sure.
and just like Jim talked about, it might be sanitary, it might be a storm sewer,
Sure.
all the things to fix some of the problems here. They're in there, and that's in the blighted area, so. It isn't because there isn't a desire, it's just because
Right.
there's nothing there
Right.
to do it with.
And perhaps moving back to St. Joe, at my age, it's like, what does St. Joe have to offer? If I wanted to move back, I would be purchasing an overpriced house, perhaps, in an area where this doesn't look as nice, that doesn't look as nice, the amenities. I get all that, keeping it a small feel. But I told my husband for years, it's like it's dying. Why would we want to move there? Other than my mother being there. But,
These are all
that's
the things that we're trying to fix.
right.
And I have to admit, because I have been on this board for 20 years now, believe it or not. I sometimes can't even wrap my head around that, but anyway, I know there's things that I wish we had done differently 10 years ago when I was on the board. And I'm never going to criticize the past administration or anything because they did what they thought was best and they did what they could do for the community. There's things I might have done differently. I know the one big one, and I know this has been a huge controversy in this community, is in 2009, we were very close to hiring an administrator. At the time, it was a tiebreaker, and BJ said no, because he wasn't ready to make that change. And that was a decision that, was made. A lot of those communities, Muhammad, Monticello, they've had an administrator for years. And it does make a difference as far as how you move things along, how you budget capital improvement, how it's a professional position that most of us who sit on this board, and for one, the mayor's position is a very part-time position, it's $300 a month. Thank goodness my husband's been very gracious that I give up my paying job, which I don't get to do fun things, but to be the mayor for $300 a month. And I guarantee you, I did not have the experience as a professional administrator to do. Now, I was the first to do my best to learn and to ask the right questions, and I did my best, the same as BJ did the best he could. But, I think that held us back on things is I know in 2004, I was handed when I became a new trustee, a stormwater master plan. It sat on the shelf for years and years and years. I would ask questions, why can't we do a street at a time? Anyway, finally, in the last 8 years, and thank goodness once I got an administrator to help on a day-to-day basis, look around town what we're doing now. We got a mess over here for the time being, but we're getting a new sewer plant. We're making some street repairs. We're repairing some stormwater. It's because we're making it work and we have the professional help to move it forward. So there's a lot of reasons that, yes, we don't necessarily want to be Muhammad, but I will say one thing about the whole Muhammad remark. Muhammad it's a different community and they have a lot of different areas to grow as far as subdivisions. I talk to their administrator all the time. I'm with the mayor. And so I was just asking the other day, I said, so what are your numbers from 2014 to 2005? They had, was 679 buildable lots. Right now, they only have 74 available to be built on. But the caveat to that is they also had 12 different subdivisions going at various different times. So yes, we're not Muhammad. We don't have the same layout as Muhammad. We did do a study to see if we ever could go north of the interstate. That would be costly for us to do that. That's where a TIF would help us to maybe generate the funds through a TIF to maybe do something on the north side. Otherwise, right now, really the only thing we have a developer, for a developer to come in would be to the east of St. Joe. There's, property there, but between dealing with our stormwater and, and because there is just that, the lot prices or, the property prices, it maybe is a little bit higher than the other surrounding property, towns. But those are all factors that play into why we are here today. Unfortunately, yes, we maybe could have done better years ago. I've seen lots of changes being on this board for 20 years. And I know, I know when I jumped in as mayor, my list was huge. I want to do this, I want to do that. And I have to say, I'm glad I got to mark off several of them, and it's been very helpful when he came in, because I started handing him my list, to get these things done. But that's all part of, wanting to get this TIF, because it's one more tool in the toolbox to hopefully get us over that hurdle to finally be making some things happen. I mean, there's no guarantees it will be successful. We certainly hope it's successful, because I believe that if it's successful and we use it to our best ability, I think in the end, all the taxing bodies and everybody, the entire community is going to benefit from it. The thing, like I said, I was going to go back to Muhammad, was we get emails and things all the time, or you'll see it on Facebook, which I try to avoid these days because it's just ugly sometimes. But is why can't we have all the amenities like Muhammad and Monticello? And it's like, we want a splash pad, and we want a swim pool, and we want all these things. And I'm not saying that with the TIF we're going to bring all those things, but it's like Muhammad has this and Muhammad has that and all that. And it's like, well, yeah, look at what they also have too, that you have to do things differently and have a larger tax base to hopefully bring in some of those other amenities. Right now, we, are getting by with our budget. We do a great job with our budgets. We always have in the village. Even, with BJ and stuff, the budget's always been great. It's just making the funds work the very best that you can. And by using this tool, I think this will be something that will help us move a little on the scale there in the right direction.
On the flip side of that, the last few years with the explosion in housing and stuff, now the schools are busting at the seams. So, you mentioned that you're low in students right now, but the flip side of that is too much, too fast, too many kids, and now we're busting at the seams, which it's not all Grand Muhammad. I'm just saying that, it's kind of like a
And it's all part of
balancing.
planning and
Yeah.
things too. And some of our facilities in the community, I know, since the schools have lost some numbers, the same as the village has lost numbers, there's room it'll take us a while to even catch up a little bit on some things. I know on the village's end, I can only speak of our budgets and things, but I know with us losing on the census in 2020, we dropped by 157 residents. So roughly by losing 157 residents already, and I'm using the estimation of numbers for 2025, what the IML gives us is roughly we're going to be losing close to $43,000 just this year alone, because our tax money that we get from the state through state income tax and motor fuel money that helps our streets and roads is done on per capita. So just right off the top, by losing that many people, our budget has gone down $43,000. So you can't continue on that trend, and as you talk about property values and stuff, right now we're doing great. Yes, it's expensive to buy a house in town because right now our property values, but in time, if people, like you are just like, why do I come to St. Joe? It would be bad for your businesses, because businesses need people to go to their businesses and shop and eat and do all that. It's bad for the village. At some point, if we don't change the trend, we're probably going to we ask for a tax referendum as far as property tax goes. The village of St. Joe, as far as my memory, as long as I've been here and I'm in county, I do not recall ever having the village go to the residents for a property tax increase. Now, we did a half-cent sales tax increase for our stormwater, and it's been very beneficial. That's one thing I held strong to, that money stays in the stormwater fund, and we have done some great projects with that. So it was a good referendum to be passed in the village, but we've never asked for more property taxes. And I'm afraid that if we don't have another way to somehow figure out to do what we need to do, by making some changes, and I think in the little piece that I put out there on your seats, I have a few little quotes on change, change is scary and all that. But, we'll either have to ask for a tax referendum, or the biggest thing would be our storm. When we did the rate study, when the first year was mayor, because we were in the process trying to figure out, what are we gonna do with the sewer plant? I early as mayor figured out that, wow, we gotta do something with the sewer plant and fast, because otherwise the IEPA is gonna be knocking on our door and say, hey, we'll fix it for you at our price, and that's not what we wanna do. So we started trying to decide what direction we're going on the sewer plant, and we worked with our engineers to figure out what our options were. But the biggest thing is we had to do a rate study to figure out how we were gonna pay for it. And yes, the rates have gone up, and we have a schedule for the rates to go up, but our rates had not been up. We had a slight increase in 2009 and a slight increase in 2012, but it wasn't enough to do the projects that we needed to do. So that's what we did. But if you don't have a little bit of growth to continue to add customers onto that, our cost for running that sewer plant keeps going up also. So, we might be good for 15 years with the rate study that we did, but if we don't have any additional, businesses or residents to go into that, unfortunately, those rates are going to have to go up again. And every year they're going to go up some to try and keep up with inflation and stuff. But I would hope that we would never have to go do a large one like we did when we first started that process. So anyway, that's really all I have to say. Does the trustees?
Did anybody know how much your property tax dollars go to the village of St. Joseph? 5.6%. So.
I did put that little chart in.
Yeah.
In your
So
packets.
that's just when you look at your property tax bill, 5.6%, and that's what your roads, your drainage, all this other stuff, then you get the other incremental stuff. That's what the street lights. So I just wanted to, a lot of people don't realize, I've had people complain to me, and I just thought I'd mention that if you didn't know it, point that out.
How much of this money, this tax money, is be leaving St. Joe to support this tip?
None of it.
None of it being St. Joe.
He's not working for nothing.
Oh, you talking about where the pay goes?
Yes.
I mean, the tip money can only be used for capital expenditure.
Yeah, but I'm talking about the tax money that we have in St. Joe. Well, it's gonna be leaving. I didn't know St. Joe had that much money in their kitty that they could go and pay for tip to come in here and tell them what to do.
I guess I don't really understand your question. The tip money was paid.
We're paying for him.
Yeah.
Oh,
We
you
should hire a
mean like
lawyer.
for a consultant or something? Just like something like that to help structure it.
Just like we paid
Yeah.
an engineer to help us with the sewer plant.
Right.
We're not engineers, so we had to get some
Yeah.
help,
That's
and
right.
that's what we have to do. Yes, absolutely.
There's gonna be a lot of it, isn't it?
No.
That's.
That money's already spent.
Drop in the bucket.
Trying to spend as little, be as frugal as possible. I look at my dollars too, so if there's things, I mean, I take I don't complain anything about expenditures, do I?
Never.
So,
So can you clarify that then? Is the consultant fees coming out of the village's
Yeah.
taxes or out of TIF money?
We don't even have tip money.
Because the reason I ask is the proposals that were shared to us said if this much money in taxes is generated, I'll use $100,000. And I'm just making these numbers up. After expenses, which were TIF consultant fees, there would be this much remaining to go to the taxing bodies. So is that correct or not correct?
I'll let Nick go ahead and.
I would like any of you to answer first. if
Well,
possible.
good, I got some.
Mayor,
Can I say
Yeah.
something? Members of the public.
and maybe I misunderstood when it was presented today.
Members of the public shouldn't dictate the meeting. So Lance is not the one that's going to be dictating the terms of who's speaking, it's you. So whoever you want to address that.
Nick, can you address that? I mean, currently, we've been paying the consultant fees.
So we charge a flat fee to establish a TIF district. There are engineering fees on top of that, those are high as well. But the biggest cost to set up a TIF is the establishment cost, right? Once you get past that, there's some administrative that's much smaller, but a couple $1,000 a year to start. And so the village is paying that now. The establishment fees can be reimbursed to the general fund once the TIF increment's there to be able to do so. But once that initial pain's over with, then it's just a very small cost going forward generally.
So it does, I'm just trying to understand if I can explain to my board. So once the TIF is established, it comes out of the TIF generated funds.
I mean, yeah, well,
Yeah.
it could.
It'll reimburse the general fund.
Yeah, okay. 'Cause that's how I was understood it, and that's all I want to make sure I understood it correct.
And, another clarification that I know that was somewhat miscommunicated on the few things that was shared with me off of Facebook was that, when you talk about, there's some people act like, oh, the village is taking all this money and that, we're, we want everybody, all you guys' is money and that sort of thing. But the fact is, like, even with these agreements that we're trying to make with the other government bodies, local taxing bodies, we're not making an agreement with ourselves as far as the tax advice. So whatever money that is generated from the TIF, from the village's tax point, is going all into the TIF. We are restricted the same as you guys as far as using on infrastructure and everything. So it's not like we're taking the money and then we can just freely use it on salaries and our day-to-day operation costs and all that sort of thing. So that money that we're not giving us a percentage of, or anything, but I mean, we're already restricted with it. So it will all go into the TIF fund. So it's not doing anything special for us, adding to our salaries and other things that the village has to do on a day-to-day basis. So that will all strictly be used for those infrastructure projects, incentives and things to better the community, which then we all will benefit from. So does that make sense? You want to say that, Roger? You want to come up and talk up here, please?
Do I have to say it? I did.
Yeah.
Okay, no problem. I just want him to explain again. Like he said something about these residences, that was a surplus money when he was addressing Susan's question. Can you explain that again? That basically the money that is generated from the residences that were
Okay, the terms of I mean, it's not an agreement that's in place, but I think the feature that everybody's agreed on the entire time is how the surplus funds work. So there are 700 or 800 parcels sold in the TIF district. Almost 500 of those parcels are existing homes, okay? And so the purpose for this TIF isn't necessarily to take the tax revenue from houses that are already there. The reason those houses are included, it could be a couple different reasons. One, as the mayor said, the money has to be spent in the TIF district generally. Not so with the other taxing bodies, but the village can only spend money in the TIF district. So if they want to do a road or a sewer or a stormwater improvement, where they're spending the money has to be in the TIF, and that's going to be a lot of the existing residential neighborhoods. Okay, so that's the reason. That's one reason why a lot of existing residentials in the TIF district. The other reason is for contiguity. So, like I said in the beginning, the area has to be contiguous. We can't just have part A of town be in, and then there's a gap, and then part B of town be in the target development areas. We have to get from A to B. And so another reason to have existing residential is to be able to do just that. So that's why the area is relatively large and there's a lot of those existing homes. Now, to mitigate the impact of that to the taxing bodies, again, we're not trying to take the village is not trying to take the money from generated by those homes. So they're giving any natural growth that occurs just by inflation, they're giving all of that back to the taxing bodies. And then that money can be spent for, that's not limited to capital expenditures, that can be spent on teacher salaries or village overhead expenses or anything that they could spend general fund money on.
So as I was your tax assessor for 8 years on the township, which also covers the village. I've been to the board at least twice over that 8 years, advising that the village cannot continue to run the village, especially infrastructure, on the backs of residential property taxes. Okay. The problem is everybody's tax bill is going to go up every year. And it has nothing to do with your assessor, had nothing to do with me as an 8-year assessor or your current assessor in 4 years. It all has to do with the assessed value of that property. And that assessed value of that property is going to increase every year. For example, on the township side, 2 years ago, we lowered our tax levy for general assistance, which is mandated to the township to run the general assistance program. We don't have anybody utilizing general assistance, so we lowered the levy. Did our tax bills go down for that? Yes. Did we see it? No, because the assessed valuation of your property will always go up here. I don't see it. I don't see a future without that. And that all has to do with the sales ratio study and the multiplier that's added on. This village was reset probably 15 years ago by the county, and everybody's property was reassessed there to bring it up to where it should have been if your assessor at that time would have brought it up, if it would have worked correctly, but it didn't. So we were reset then. Your current, including myself and the new assessor, are not reassessing homes throughout the village at all, unless you build onto your home or a new property is established. Then it's brought up and assessed at its current value. So my question, one is, Nick, you're saying these 500 parcels roughly that are residential, we know that they're always are going to increase in value and assessed valuation. And the village is agreeing that those 500 parcels, every year that's going to go up, that our taxing bodies are going to be getting that reimbursement for that?
Yeah, another way of saying it is on those 500 parcels, there will be zero impact to the taxing bodies, that they will get all of that. And the revenue from that increase in valuation that you said happens over time, you get all of that back. Now, the only exception to that, again, this is part of the negotiation, but the only exception that may be if one of those parcels becomes the subject of an agreement. And the village isn't targeting, like, they're not going to do these little grants on every house to try and save themselves from having to give, to not have to declare surplus. It's more to control, and it happens a lot. You have some existing homes, they're kind of your downtown or your commercial area, and then someone wants to tear those down and build a new convenience store, restaurant or something. And so, but they need to be able to have the incentives available to do that type of project. And so, again, the current draft of the agreement proposed that anything like that happens comes out of that surplus declaration. But aside from that very limited example, you're correct. Any natural growth like you're describing, or any increase in EAV that's going to lead to some of increment, that's all going back to the taxing bodies, and that money can be used for any purpose. And the good thing about PTEL counties and if you have limiting factors, this doesn't, this is extra money that doesn't feed into that. For the schools, assessed value is one of many factors that the state looks at when determining state aid. Any money you get from a TIF agreement doesn't play into that. So this is just extra money that helps, shield that growth from state, and then if other taxing bodies have something similar, shield in that. So this really is, we get this agreement done, it really is something that can help everybody and benefit everybody in more ways than just getting back to the agreement.
I'd like to try and wrap it up. My trustees, nothing more to say, Matt.
Yeah.
Angela.
I do.
there's just a couple things that I want to express. I know like you talked about Muhammad having this explosion, which they absolutely have. And I know we've said that nobody here wants to turn this into Muhammad. I lived in Muhammad when the population was 1,500, so I get it. But that kind of explosion isn't can't happen here because we're too landlocked. It's too expensive to go underneath, maybe 30 years from now, I don't know, what'll happen, if it'll go underneath the interstate. And the areas that can be developed, the property owners want a very high price per acre. And the developers don't want to pay that. And I am not, those property owners, I'm not vilifying them in any way, shape or form, because it's simple supply and demand. They have the place, it's the only place that it can happen. And so, just like a hotel on Mom's Day weekend, suddenly the price is $400, and so that's just the way that it is. And so with the TIF, they obviously are hoping to close that gap so that a developer will want to build houses, but the developer was talking about building possibly 7 to 10 houses a year. So Muhammad isn't gonna happen here, but I just, and you're right, 23 years from now, that's a long time. That is a long time, and we aren't gonna be here, none of us are gonna be here, and we don't know what's gonna happen 23 years from now, and that is exactly for the same reason that people have concerns about it, or the same reason that we have concerns or are taking this so seriously, because we don't know how it's gonna go. But what we do know is what doesn't work. I hope that I hope that if the TIF, goes through, that everything is gonna work out. Because all these people, all of you people, and the people, I don't wanna say these people, the people that are on the boards in this town and that are in the fire department and the schools, they're our friends too, so we live with them, we work with them, we see them on a regular basis. So everybody wants to, find a way to make this work, because it's not like these are just faceless people that we're like, yeah, check, it matters a lot, and it matters to everybody on the board, and everybody has taken this very seriously. But anyway, I just wanted to express that, and I hope that we can find a way to make it work for everyone.
I have a question. Susan said a couple times about the library moving or can't move, and I understand it can't move. What, has it ever been suggested that it move, or?
There have been people in the past that approached board members like 20 years ago, offering us, they were wanting us to move into the middle school and be a combined public library, middle school library, not understanding how the state rules with libraries and the laws that affect it. But, and that's when I said we can't, because of the trust. My dream, okay. I once had somebody joke that if they ever see me messing with the grain elevator, I don't know why, but I'm not going to. But my best thing that would happen would be for the grain elevator to fall in the library. I joke about it. I also joke that I want nobody in the building when it happens, because that's going to be a nightmare. And I hope that I'm not the librarian at the time, because of trying to clean up the mess and figure out what books we still have usable at that point. But anyway, being able to rebuild a building that's 2 stories, or talking to the village about getting permission to go 3 stories. Because I had a trustee 20 years ago look at if we did 2 stories with adding in all the stuff for elevators, stairwells, maintenance for the elevators, we'd lose any space we gain with the 2nd floor. Only if we go to 3 floors do we actually gain appreciable space. But again, people's needs are changing. Since I'm sure most of you know, with COVID, things have changed. People are doing more online downloadable stuff. They do check out books, but they still don't like coming in and doing great big, like the crafts I used to do, where I'd have 60 kids in an hour in the library. They come and pick them up and take them home and do them in their own home. They don't, there's a lot of things that have changed with COVID, and it's changing the way the libraries are trying to serve our public, which is why I think we can get by with the space we have. We read aggressively. We're always getting the new stuff, and it's not like you're going to only get 20-year-old books in my library. I've got the newest Frida McFadden's, Colleen Hoover's, Clive Cussler, Tom Clancy. We only carry 1 copy. You may have to wait a while, but we carry them. So I believe in doing the best we can with, and being fiscally responsible with what I have been given to be entrusted with.
Mark, do you have anything, Mark is our village attorney and he covers a lot of other villages in the area. And majority of them have TIFs. Is there anything you'd like to share a response in regards to as far as what you've experienced with your other communities? I know I'm putting you on the spot.
No, you're, it's my job.
You're so close to having.
For Max's benefit, I only represent about 15 municipalities, so let me go through each one. I would say that, the poster, I would say this, that the worst thing that can happen with your TIF district is that we just remain the black box on the little diagram there. And that is nothing happens. That's the worst that can happen, in which case the money that you spent to set up the district is your only loss. So if absolutely no development happens over the next 3 years, that was your one roll of the dice, and that's your downside. When I first got exposed to these would have been roughly around the year 2000. And I was very thick-headed about them because they seemed like they were hocus pocus, and you couldn't, you weren't going to make anything happen with it. And it just seemed like, what I was fixated on was, we set up this TIF district, and on this graph, it shows your base EAV. And then it looked to me like we were robbing everybody else with this money that was happening up here. And my mayor at the time was a music teacher at the local school district in Fisher, Milt Kelly. And he and I kind of shared this, but we had a terrible problem. That was, we had a senior class of 8 kids in our high school. So we were gonna lose our school district. So what we did was, so we had to be a little more open-minded about it, and we looked at it. That's all right, we don't need this, by golly. So it took me a long time to understand that, but for the TIF district, this wouldn't happen. And built into the model is there's a stream of income that goes from the TIF to the school district, regardless of whether there's an agreement or not. And it also took me a long time to realize that this calculation with the way the state works would hide whatever new development we had from the state formula that shared money to all our tax districts. So at any rate, what happened was the money that we used from the TIF district was going to pay for infrastructure for a brand new subdivision that put in a bunch of houses. Because we had the TIF, we didn't advance any money, but the developer was able to leverage the money that they were going to get for these reimbursements to be able to borrow money to fund all of their infrastructure. So as a village, we had zero risk. And I can say this now, at the time, I didn't feel like that was a case that was a long learning curve for me. So what would happen is the developer came in and put in the streets and put in the sewer that needed to go in and paid for all that infrastructure. And if we hadn't had the TIF, the developer could never afford to do all of that. So what happened was we, I would say in a period of 6 or 7 years, 6 years, we had all the subdivision go in. The schools didn't lose any money. In fact, they made money. And we preserved our school district that we otherwise would have lost. The other villages that we, that's like the poster child for where we saved the school district, literally, right? So the other town where it's successful is in Tolono. We hadn't had any new development there for 1 billion years. And we had a new subdivision on the west side of town as a result of it. And that was really beneficial for the community. Now, what did happen was
the little tiny districts didn't fare so well, namely the Park District and the library. But they also didn't have a great increase in amount of traffic. But what did happen was over time, as the village was reimbursing these developers, it started to accumulate its own money it could use for capital projects. So in Tolono, we put a new roof on the library. We put in new flooring for the library. We helped the fire district build its new building. Did we have to do any of those things? No, but we did. Fisher did the same thing. They partnered with the school district to do kinds of extra stuff. Villa Grove has one that's not as successful as Fisher or Tolono, but it still is pretty successful. And it does kind of those augmented things that we do for the other villages. I'm just trying to think of some of the other towns. Gibson City has a TIF district that we have in an industrial park. We're trying to, get more businesses that are making things and doing things. And so that kind of development doesn't have any increase in impact on the other taxing bodies, but it has a big impact on the community's ability to generate jobs within. Gibson is partially a commuter town for Bloomington, but it still has a lot of manufacturing. I mean, it's got an intersection of towns, and it has huge grain facility. And then of course we've got One Earth Energy where we produce a lot of ethanol. And we just attracted, it's public record, so I'm not speaking out of school, but there's a California company that makes those corn nuts. They're really healthy for you. They manufacture in California, and they're opening up their facility in Gibson. And the big tool that we had, which is the only tool we have as a small town, was TIF to help attract that, right? So the upside is really pretty high. The downside is just what you wrote the check to Nick to set this up. So if it doesn't work, then that's your only downside. So that's my summary.
I appreciate it. Thank you. All right, to close it, I guess we're going to close the public hearing. And with that, I will officially close the public hearing, and then we will have someone make a motion to adjourn.
Best motion of the night.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
And I want to thank everybody here. I was actually a little beat up all day today about this meeting. I appreciate how well it went. Thank you for being here.